All good to go.
Well, it's good to be with everybody. What a joy it is to have run well. We did run well. And we are at the tape, and we refuse to calm down and slack our riding. If we can improve the world by creating one good leader, it would have been worth the time. So we give God the credit, we give God the glory, and we are exceptionally blessed to have the goodly Reverend Dr. Kwame Gilbert, and he is with us tonight. What a joy it is. I've got my pencils, my pens, and my notebook ready. I'm about to take some notes and tell the folks the Lord revealed this to me while I was in deep prayer and meditation. All right. Over to you, Reverend Gilbert. God bless.
Thank you so much, Apostle. Can you see, if you can hear me clearly, just give me a quick thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. And all right, thank you so much, Apostle. Again, I want to celebrate what you're doing in the body of Christ, what you've been doing for years in the body of Christ, bringing nuggets of truth, whether it's on leadership or God wants you to prosper, or on teachings on the apostle, or on the end times, being rapture ready. Always a blessing to hear from you. And so for those of you who might not be very familiar with the apostle, we can't really talk about leadership without me talking about the influence that the apostle has had on my own life. I've often said, and I think I will continue to say that for as long as I have breath in my body, there is no one single person that I can point to that have influenced me more than Apostle Esse-boom, and that is the plain truth. People come into your life, and their impact on your life is fleeting, because impact is really an event. Impact is instantaneous, like a car hitting another car or someone striking you a blow. Impact is really instantaneous. Impact is usually an event, but influence is something that goes beyond impact. And I've always maintained that there are preachers I know who have impacted me. I've been impacted by people like Jakes. I've been impacted by people like Miles Monroe, but I have been influenced by Apostle Esse-boom. Influence is subtle. It is more lasting. It's like a woman putting yeast in a bit of flour and come back a few hours later and everything about the flour has changed. And you're wondering, when did the change occur? Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening, but it's happening. And so that's what leadership is. And that's what Apostle Esse-boom represents in my life. Subtle, gradual, but lasting influence that has, in a great way, made me much of who I am today. So that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about, actually. I'm going to be talking about influence today, how to become a person of influence. And I'm going to try as much as possible. This course, whenever I teach this course, it usually takes me about 12 hours. We don't have 12 hours. So I'm going to try to condense it. If I don't condense it, I'm just going to lift out a few things here and there that is going to be of value to you. So here we go. I'm going to, every now and then, I'm going to pop some slides up there so that you can see. So what we're really looking at today is the work of John Maxwell, actually the book that he wrote, Becoming a Person of Influence. Is the material that discuss one of the almost 100 books written by John Maxwell. And he's considered to be one of the foremost authorities on leadership, influence, personal development around the world. And I want you to think for a minute about someone who has greatly influenced your life. I've already told you about the one person that have influenced me the most. Think about that one person in your life that has helped you to become who you are today. Think about that one person that has helped you to be who you are today. Maybe it's your mother, your father, maybe it's your pastor, or someone that you have shared a relationship with in a certain context. And I can tell you, if you identify that person, you realize that that person may not necessarily have a title. They may not have a title or a badge as being this great person or great leader. But the truth is, they have exercised influence, because influence is not about a position. And that's what leadership is. And so these two young men that you're looking at today, I call them the Three Musketeers. Years ago, my oldest son was asked to introduce me to a group of men at a Father's Day program. And just about that time, when he introduced me, I was serving for a little while in government. I had just completed about 12 years of studying, had graduated with my doctoral degree and all of that. And so I expected, when my son introduced me, I expected him to talk a little about my academic accomplishments. He didn't mention any of that. He talked about some things having to do with the relationship that I have with his mother. And what he admires most about me is not these academic things, but the relationship I shared with his mom. Influence. Every day, you and I are in, and by the way, this is his mother. She is the mother of my children. And I think our greatest achievements sometimes are not the things we leave for our children. Our greatest accomplishment sometimes is what we leave in them, the legacy that we're building in them, some things we leave in them. After we are gone, the influence that we have had on them, I think those are the important things. And I'm going to put up a list there. I'm going to ask you to identify some of the people on this list. And I'm sure you know them: Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, Barack Obama, Billy Graham. Well, in the context of Guyana, I don't know how many of you are from Guyana, but in the context of Guyana, Lyndon Forbes, Samson Burnham, those are names: Mahatma Gandhi, Colin, Esse-boom, Mother Teresa, Rihanna.
That's a big name in there.
There you go. Nick Vujicic. Now, I'm sure that you can recognize most of the names. Most of you may not know the last name, Nick, but this is who he is: a young man who was born without limbs. Born without limbs. He's from Melbourne, Australia. He's a preacher. He's a motivational speaker. He swims. He surfs. He plays golf. He skydives. He speaks to thousands, and he's happily married. He has a life. He has influence, and he uses his influence. So let me ask you a question. What is your problem? What is your problem? What is your problem that you're holding on to, that the enemy has told you that you can never succeed, or you can never be a person of influence? Nick, born without hands and feet, but he has influence and he's using it. So the question is, what about you? What influence do you have that you are not using? So leadership is about influence. Leadership is about influence. Now, I'm not sure how many of you on this call this evening, and those of you on Facebook, how many of you consider yourself to be leaders? But I'm going to say to you, regardless of what position or you hold or don't hold, you are a leader. You might be a music minister, or you might be a single mother raising 6 children. You are a leader in some context, because leadership is really about influence. Sometimes we don't take enough time to understand the difference between a leader and leadership, but a leader really is someone with influence. And if you have influence only over one person, you're still a leader, because that's what it is. And when the real leader speaks, people listen, because leadership is about influence. John Maxwell says, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is about influence. So the question to you is, how do you increase your influence? Because increased influence equals increased leadership. If you can increase your influence, then you are increasing your leadership. And that is what we really want to talk about, how you can increase your leadership. And so the whole goal of this session this evening is to make you an influencer. And if you do have influence, how to increase that influence. So there have been meetings of only a moment, which have left impressions for life, for eternity. No one can understand that mysterious thing that we call influence. Yet every one of us continually exerts influence, either to heal, to bless, to leave marks of beauty, or to wound, to hurt, to poison, or to stain other lives. I want us to think about that for a minute, because every day, you are exerting influence, but you can exert it for good or you can exert it for evil. So watch the influence you have. Some of the persons on the list that I put up earlier, they had influence. Some of them are still alive. They have influence, but not everyone used their influence for good. Some of them use their influence to do evil. And we've got to watch that. So what do you use your influence for? All right. What do you use your influence for? That's the question. Now, like I said, influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, the development, or the behavior of someone or something. So when you have influence as a leader, you have an effect on the character. You have an effect on the development. You have an effect on the behavior of someone. So if as a leader, you are not impacting someone's development, or you're not impacting their character, or you're not impacting their behavior, then really, you're not really exerting influence as a leader. So when you have influence, you are going to change these things about people. It's not just about how we motivate them, or how we are able to stimulate their intellect. You can stimulate someone's intellect, but it doesn't mean that you are producing a change in their character. You can stimulate their intellect, but it doesn't mean that you are actually impacting their development. And that's what influence is all about: impacting their character, their development, their behavior. And I think Apostle many of us can testify of how Apostle has done that. So one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is to conduct what I call an influence inventory, influence inventory, starting with who do you influence? Who do you influence? All right. Now, you don't have to be in a high profile position or occupation to be a person of influence. In fact, if your life in any way connects with people, you are an influencer. So the principle is that as a leader, you attract who you are, not who you want. And what does that mean? Excellence attracts excellence. If you are, as a leader, you are operating at a level of mediocrity, you may desire to have people of influence on your team, but what you will actually attract are people who function at a mediocre level. So think about that. You attract who you are. When you up the bar in your own life as a leader, you are going to also attract people who are functioning at that level. But if you function at a level of mediocrity every time as a leader, you will attract those kinds of people. Excellence attracts excellence. Now, how do you influence others? Not only who do you influence, remember we're doing an inventory here. How do you influence others? All right. How you influence people will determine, in a large way, how you influence people will determine how long and how effectively you influence them. The means by which. So the first means by which people influence others is by force. Some people influence others by force. They have no choice in the decision. So they exert physical, mental, and emotional or legal pressure to achieve their results. There are some leaders who do that. They exert pressure on people, physical pressure, mental pressure, emotional pressure, legal pressure to get people to do what they want. And so that too is influence, but is influenced by force. And that is the lowest level of influence there is on the leadership scale. You're not going to get people to follow you very long if you are influencing them by force. Some people influence by intimidation. That's the second level, right? My way or the highway. And this is often seen in appointed or positional leadership. I am the boss here, comply or else. So there's that intimidation. It's not quite force, it's more intimidating. So there's certain rewards and consequences kind of thing, carrot and stick approach. If you do this, you get this. If you don't do that, you don't get this. And so people are moved because they're intimidated to get things done. So positional authority sometimes uses that level of intimidating influence to get people to act and to move. And then there is the third level of influence, which is manipulation, where there's a winner and a loser. All right? This kind of influence is more subtle. It is where we often begin by giving an impression of genuine interest or concern in the well-being of the individual. But really, we are simply trying to create trust in order to convert that trust into achieving our own agenda. So what a person does by manipulation is that they try to create an environment where they try to get the person to trust them. They come across as being genuine. They come across as being interested or concerned about the well-being of the person. But really what they're trying to do is to get the person to trust them. And then they're going to shift over to really pursuing their own agenda, now that they have the person under their control. And so there are some leaders who lead or create influence by manipulation. Then the fourth one is position. We follow because we have to. So this level of influence seeks to take advantage of an individual's loyalty. So compliance is considered as loyalty, and complaining is considered to be disloyalty. All right. So there's no dissension in this kind of leadership and influence, where when a person points out certain things to the leader, it is usually viewed as being disloyal. When someone speaks up, it is disloyal. That loyalty is often viewed as you have to comply. You have to comply. If at any point you have a brain of your own and you decide you're going to question the leader's authority, not authority, but you will question the leader's decision, you will question their methodology, it is viewed as disloyal, because you should not question your leader position. So this kind of leader, they prefer regimentation. They prefer structure. Did you hear what the chief said? So people usually refer back to the leader as, you heard what the chief said, you heard what the boss said, you have to follow the chief. So there's this compliance. Everybody in the organization, when they want to get people to fall in line, you remember what the boss said, you heard what the chief said, you got to do what the chief says. And so you have a fierce loyalty to established positional leadership. And you see that a lot, for example, in the military. There's that chief loyalty to positional leadership. The chief said, the commander-in-chief said, the boss said. And so whatever the boss said goes. We don't question the boss. There's no dissension where the boss is concerned. So that's positional authority. And then there is exchange influence, where we both win something. This kind of influence is created through engagement and collaboration. I see you as my equal. I see you as my equal. We have different gifts. We have different functions, but equal in importance and value. That's important. Let me back up on that. We have different gifts, but I see you as my equal. I see you as having value. So when people recognize that you are not just interested in getting your thing done, but you're equally concerned about them achieving their level of success as well, you're more likely to create lasting influence with them. So when I teach on the different leadership styles, for example, transactional leadership as opposed to transformational leadership, it's one of the things we discuss. In the transactional leadership approach, they are more concerned about the production. In the transformational leadership approach, the concern is really on the persons. And so the transformational leader is not just concerned about he or she achieving their objective. They want to know, as they are achieving their goal, that the individuals in the process, the people in the process, that they are also achieving their goals, that they are also growing, that they are also being empowered. All right? And it's very important for us to understand that. And then there is the other level, which I call persuasion, the persuasion level of influence. We follow because we want to. It's not because the boss says or manipulation. This level of influence is created through strategic messaging. It distracts people from other narratives that's going on in their lives. There's something about the message in lip and life that points them away from their lesser self to their better self. And so the message from the leader shifts the person's perspective that they want to come along to discover what else is there to discover. Persuasion. So the message of the leader is powerful. The lifestyle is powerful. The people want to follow because they can't wait to discover who they can become, because the leader points out in his lip and life, in his message, that you can be greater than you are. And so they follow that leader because there's something about the leader that says, the leader is great, but I can also be great. So they follow because they're passionate about discovering themselves and discovering their potentials, because there's something about how the leader functions that says to them, you have greatness in you. And so they are persuaded. They are persuaded to follow and to become. All right. And then there is the respect level of leadership. Respect level of leadership. And that is a powerful one. So it is something that we must discover. Let me just get back my slide. There we go. This level we follow because of the respect we have for the influencer. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, when I attended the IMC, which was John Maxwell, I was being certified as a John Maxwell trainer and speaker. John Maxwell was teaching on leadership, and there were people from all over the world that attended. Many of them were not Christians, but John took a break from one of his sessions one evening, and he said, look, I'm going to finish here. He said, listen, you know I'm a Jesus lover, and tomorrow morning I'm going to have a devotion for about an hour, and I'm going to talk about this Jesus who has changed my life. And for those of you who are interested, you can come along. There are lots of people in there who are not Christians, because John Maxwell, when he has his IMCs, there are leaders from around the world that attend. That next morning, I attended that devotion that John Maxwell had. There were hundreds of people there. 800, 900 people. And he made an altar call after he taught for about 20 minutes. He said, how many of you would like to get to know this Jesus personally? And I watched people literally ran to the altar, and tears came to my eyes, and I picked up the phone and I called my wife, and I said, I have just seen the power of influence at work. That people responded to John, not because he preached a powerful word. They responded to him because of the respect they had for him and the influence that he had. And so when you have great influence with people, there are times when the level of influence you have, it can cause people to hear your message in a way that they will not hear the message of others, to believe in you in the way they will not believe in others because of your influence. And that influence, of course, is earned through consistency of character. It is earned through a consistency of adding value to others. So sometimes when we have great influence, people will follow because of the respect that they have. That's a different level of influence altogether. So again, the question is, how are you influencing? How are you influencing? Are you influencing by force, by intimidation? Or are you influencing through respect? That's the highest level. That's the highest level. And I pray that as leaders that we would really, thrive to become influencers who will influence others through respect. And then we can talk about how many persons, we are influencing. As a leader, the number of people who follow is based on our level of influence. Everyone influences someone. There's some who influences more than others. I read an article that talked about the amount of people that Justin Bieber is a singer, influenced 9,585,000. Britney Spears, 9,170,000. Barack Obama, 7 million is back. But that was a few years ago. Maybe his influence has grown. How many do you influence? So how you influence will greatly determine the extent of your influence in terms of how many people you influence. And your influence can grow as well. And that's what we're talking about. So the difference there is your leadership potential and there is your leadership level. The difference between your leadership level and your leadership potential is great. Where you want to be, which is your leadership potential, your leadership level is where you are. How do you bridge the gap between your leadership level in terms of where you are and your leadership potential? How do you bridge that gap? And that is so important because as a leader, many of us, where we are as a leader is not the extent of our true potential. And I've always tried to elaborate that there's a difference between your leadership ability and your leadership potential. Your abilities are the things and the word ability came from the word able. Your ability really are the things you're able to do. Your abilities based on the things that you're able to do, based on things you've done, based on things you are doing, you are able to determine your ability. So ability speaks of ableness. Your potential are those things that are in you that you have not tapped into as yet. And there are many of us who are functioning at a leadership level that is way below our leadership potential. So how do you bridge the gap between your leadership level, which is your leadership ability right now, and your leadership potential, what you can become? So your leadership, taking responsibility for your realities. Let's begin there. The first step of your leadership level to get you to your leadership potential is to take responsibility for your realities. The first responsibility of a leader is to define reality, which means understand where you are right now. Own where you are right now. There are lots of people who live in denial. They're not willing to acknowledge this is where I'm starting. This is my starting point. This is where I am right now. And I've often tried to clarify for people on this idea of leadership, the importance of making a distinction between your competence and your confidence. And lots of leaders don't know the difference. There's a difference between your competence and your confidence. Your confidence is what you think you can do. And you can be big on confidence, but your competence is what you actually can do. And sometimes, as some people in leadership don't know the difference. Every one of us, we have limitations. I have some. We all have limitations. And you have to know them, which means that you have to know that there's some areas that you're not going to be competent in. And when you understand your competence, then you can develop your confidence in the areas where you know you have competencies. You following? So don't try to oversell yourself because of your confidence level in areas where you may not have competence. Work on the things that you're good at. There's a reason you have weaknesses. I've often said to people, why are you focusing on your weaknesses? Focus on your strengths. Be aware of your weaknesses. Because if you're not aware of them, they can come back to haunt you and destroy you. But don't listen, I am not a painter. I'm not going to try to develop my ability to paint. That's not my strength. If I need to get the place painted, I'm going to get someone to come in whose job it is to paint. I will focus that time that I will spend trying to paint the place. I will focus maybe on developing my speaking ability or you understand what I'm saying? I know my strengths. I will focus on my strengths. You get paid for your strengths. You following? The reason you have a weakness is because your weakness is someone else's strength. So when I teach on leadership, this is what I say: outsource your weaknesses. Cultivate your strengths and outsource your weaknesses. In essence, if there are areas where you're weak, outsource them. Let someone else deal with that. Work on you. Work on your strengths. And if there's only one, be the best at it. Be the best at it. So the first step in getting from your leadership level to your leadership potential is to define your reality, know your reality. Secondly, the willingness to change. Willingness to change. It is proven that most of us do not rise to the occasion in a crisis. We simply revert back to our level of learning and experience. That is powerful. That is powerful. I'm going to repeat that for those of you who are writing. It is proven that most of us, we do not rise to the occasion in times of crisis. We simply revert back to our level of learning and experience. A lot of people, and this is not for everyone, but most people, when they're faced with a crisis, rather than rise to the occasion, they go back to their default. They go back to the level of learning they have had and the level of experiences they have had. And that's where they find their comfort. So as a leader, if you're going to get to your leadership potential, there must be a willingness to change. So you start with understanding your current reality, but the second step is the willingness to change. Change is the willingness to embrace the unknown and to experiment with the unproven. Oh, I'm telling you, I'm saying some good stuff tonight. Change is the willingness to embrace the unknown and to experiment with the unproven. And most of us, we don't want that. It's scary. It stretches us. I'm not going in that area. You know, I noticed during the time of the pandemic, how many persons were unwilling to experiment with social media and all of the virtual platforms and so on, because it stretched us. It made us vulnerable. We didn't want to show up on TV with the camera upside down, with boogie in your nose. So the vulnerability is what we were afraid of, but that's what change requires. Change is going to pull on you and make you vulnerable. Change is going to pull on you. You got to step out of your comfort zone. And every one of us have a comfort zone. And a comfort zone, no one grows in their comfort zone. Your comfort zone is the place of least resistance. Your comfort zone is the place where you are most likely to have all of the factors working in your favor. When you step out of your comfort zone, it means you're willing to stretch, to be vulnerable. And which brings me to the third point to get you to your leadership potential: the desire to grow. The desire to grow. Very little in life can be accomplished without a desire. Very little in life can be accomplished without a desire. We must begin with that desire. A desire to grow is fueled by a dissatisfaction with one's current stage or state. I'm using those two words kind of cautiously because I don't like to talk about state, because usually when we speak about a state, the state usually speaks of some element of unchangeable permanence. So you're in a state. So like debt, for example, is a state. But when we speak of a stage, it means that it's going to change. You're growing through it. And that's why I've always said to people, singleness is not a state. Your singleness is a stage. You're growing through it. You're gonna be better as a result. So as a desire to grow is fueled by a dissatisfaction with one's current stage and a vision, which is a clear mental picture of a preferred future. That's a definition I got from the apostle. Having a clear mental picture of what you want your future to look like, a vision. So a desire to grow is fueled by a dissatisfaction with your current stage, but a desire for something better. So if you don't have a desire to be better than you are, if you don't have a vision for more than you have right now, you're not going to grow. We grow when we become dissatisfied, because dissatisfaction is really a prerequisite for change, and change is a prerequisite for growth. So dissatisfaction, change, growth. You've got to be dissatisfied. When you're dissatisfied, you will change. And when you change, or willing to change, you will grow. You will grow. So there it is, if you're taking a picture. So you begin with your leadership, understanding of your leadership level, you change, and then you grow. All right? So when do we influence? That's an important question. When do you influence? I want you to reflect on that for a minute, because the truth is there are times and opportunities for you to influence that may not come every day or every month. There are moments and seasons for you to have the greatest of influence, and you have to know that. You have to know when you can have maximum influence. You have to know when to influence. So our value and our significance arises when we influence others at a time when it is most needed. Let me repeat that. Your value as a leader, your significance as a leader rises when we influence others at a time when that influence is needed most. And you got to understand that there are times, like I said, when the influence will be needed most. So an indispensable quality of a transformational leader is the ability to discern destiny-making moments. There's some moments that will create destiny. You've got to know it. You've got to know it. And listen, I don't know how many of you saw the race earlier today with Sha'Carri, but I can tell you that's why you don't count people out when they're failing, because failing doesn't make you a failure. Failing is really teaching you the way to succeed. Oh, my friend, failure teaches you what direction success really is in. I think it was Michael Jordan who said that. I've learned more from my failure than I've learned from my successes. So an indispensable quality of a transformational leader is the ability to discern those moments when you can have the greatest influence. There are critical moments in every individual's life when they are most vulnerable, most afraid. You following? Most confused, most embarrassed. Whoever steps into those moments of crisis will secure the greatest place of influence in that person's life. You following? Whenever someone is afraid or vulnerable or embarrassed or confused, whoever steps into their life in those transitional periods in their life usually have the greatest degree of influence in their life. I can tell you this, that many of us don't realize the destiny-making moments available when someone's going through a crisis. Because it's in those moments of crisis when you step in that you can have the greatest influence. And sometimes we don't realize that that is also how we impact leaders as well. How we impact leaders. Many of us may have opportunities to work closely with leaders, whether it's in the context of church or community or nation. When you solve a problem for a leader, you will have much more influence with that leader than if you were constantly bringing complaints to that leader. You following? Leaders usually look for people who help them to solve problems. They don't need people to bring problems to them. They already have problems of their own. And you need to write this down if you're writing. The bigger the problem you solve, the greater your reward. Your level of your remuneration is usually determined by the level of the problems you fix. When you fix small problems, then your reward will be small. When you fix great problems, when you fix big problems, when you are a solution to big problems, then your reward will be great. So understand that. When do you influence? So you must know that there's an opportune time for you to have the greatest degree of influence. Don't miss those moments. When you miss moments to influence, you're impacting negatively on your own leadership ability. So when do you influence others? So the first opportunity I want to touch on tonight for leadership or for influence is what I call teachable moments. Teachable moments. Leaders are readers. Leaders are readers, and they're able to read an environment to sense when there are teachable moments. Did you hear what I just said? Leaders are readers. And by readers, I'm not just talking about reading books, but leaders are able to read situations and they can see a teachable moment in there. You know, one of the things I used to do in the past, I've always had an interest in politics and political figures. I used to look at the way Barack Obama would convert a tense moment with a heckler or someone who was behaving unruly in his presence, how he would transfer that moment into something rather than embarrass the person. He would transfer that moment into something where he can teach. And I've watched even Apostle Esse-boom. He's always teaching. We'd be driving down the road, for example, and we would see something, maybe a goat or something. And he would find a story. He would find a lesson in those little things to teach you something. Moments. There's always a principle. And that is something I've always said to people about Apostle Esse-boom. He can find teachable moments in almost everything, whether it's a leaf falling off a tree. He's always finding a moment to teach you something in simple things. Great leaders, they look for moments to impart wisdom. They look for moments to point people in a new direction or to simply add value to someone. So teachable moments that are recognized and seized will position you to have the greatest influence with others. You know, the problem is a lot of people sometimes have people around them who are trying to teach them something, but they're not teachable. And the reason a lot of people sabotage their own future is because they are not teachable. When you try to teach them something from a life experience, they take it personal as a rebuke or as an assault. And rather than learn from what you're trying to teach them, they become offended. And offense shuts down the opportunity to learn. You can never learn if you are offended. You have to see the value in the experience. What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? I'll give you a typical example of a teachable moment. Many years ago, the apostle, when he was my pastor then, he had invited me to meet him for a meeting at his home. I don't even think he can remember that. But I was to meet him for a certain time. When I got to his home, I was late. When I got to his home, I rapped on the door. He opened the door and he looked at me with this blank look on his face. And I said, what's happening, Bishop? He would not let me in the house. And then he said, who are you? I thought he was kidding. So I said, Bishop, wow, it's me, man. And then he said, no. He said, I had a meeting 15 minutes ago or half an hour, I don't remember how long it was, with Kwame Gilbert. He didn't show up. So who are you? When I tell people that story, it might seem as though it was harsh, it was unreasonable, but I can tell you the lesson I learned. The lesson I learned in that moment is the importance of valuing other people's time. Valuing other people's time. Some people could be offended by that. Now, I could have been offended by that and said, I don't know what he's getting blown out of proportion about. It's only 20 minutes, it's only half an hour, whatever. But I can tell you, I hate lateness. There's nothing that offends me more than showing up late. I do not like to show up late for anything. Lateness, for me, lateness is a character flaw. If I say to you, I am going to come at 10 o'clock, I'm telling you that I will be there at 10 o'clock. I've given you my word that I'll be there at 10 o'clock. And then I show up there at 20 past 10. For me, that says that my word cannot be trusted, that I do not have an appreciation and a value for time, because time is precious. So I hate lateness. I hate lateness in my own life. I hate anyone who makes me late. I hate hate might be a strong word. I despise being late for anything. When I set a time, I try to adjust my life to ensure that I am there for that event, for the time. I don't care who comes late. For me, I want to be there on the time I say I will be there, because time is not something that you can buy back. So many of us, we miss destiny moments because we are late. I've often said to people, lateness increases the potential of an accident, which can put you in debt, financial debt, or it can cause you to lose your life. When you are late, you're more likely to speed. When you are late, you're more likely to take risk. All of these things. And so for me, lateness can do no good. And that's why I tell people, when you are late, you're putting your life at risk, you're putting your finances at risk. Just show up on time. Adjust your life so that you can be early, so that you can avoid speeding, avoid taking risk, that you can get there on time in a relaxed frame of mind. When you're late, you are stressed because you're thinking, I'm going to be late. So you're taking chances, you're dodging through the traffic, all of that. Now you may say, well, that has nothing to do. I'm telling you, it has a lot to do with everything. I have a respect for time. I have a respect for time. If someone asks me to speak for 20 minutes, I will try to speak for 19 minutes. I don't go over it by 3 minutes and 10 minutes and say the Spirit of the Lord is leading. I try not to do that. I try to keep, and my apostle taught me that. He has taught me by his own lifestyle. He can preach for 5 minutes and give you a sermon. If you give him an hour, you would preach for an hour. If you give him 5 minutes, he will preach for that 5 minutes, give you all the points, and he will sit down. Because time is precious. We value time. We value time. So leaders are readers. They're teachable moments where we look for opportunities to impart wisdom, to point out direction. We recognize and seize the opportunity, but to position ourselves to have influence. So if you're a leader, look for teachable moments. Look for teachable moments. Number next, breakthrough places. I'm not going to be able to finish tonight, but I'll give you as much as I can. Breakthrough places. That's another opportunity for you and I to have influence with people. Breakthrough occurs in people and organization when they hurt enough that they have to change. When they learn enough to want to change. When they receive enough that they're able to change. Breakthrough places. So I'm going to repeat that for those of you who are writing. You can have great influence with people when you sense breakthrough places in their life, which is when they hurt enough that they have to change. So when people go through a whole lot of stuff and they have been beaten up, beaten down, they are hurting, that they have no choice but to change. As a leader, we can discern that, and that's when we can have influence with them because they have hurt enough and they have to change. Or we can have influence with people when we understand that they have learned enough and they want to change. So when they have learned from their experiences, they have learned from the information we are giving them, that they want to change, they have a desire to change, we can have influence with them. So teach, instruct, so that they're given enough and they have learned enough. And then finally, they have received enough, which means that they're empowered enough that they are now able to change. Usually when I talk about the whole ability or ableness to change, I would put in a caveat there because I would say to people, you have to understand that there is a difference between ableness and willingness. What do I mean by that? There are some people who are able to change, but not willing to change. And there are some people who are willing to change, but just not able to change, which means they do not have the resources. They're willing, but they just have not received enough that makes them able to change. They're still struggling with inadequacies, insufficiencies, and lack, and all of the things that disempowers them, that they are not able, willing, but not able to change. And as a leader, if we understand that, we understand hurts, they have no choice but change. They learn, so they have enough to change, and they have received enough empowerment, so they are able to change. Let me see how much more I can give you before we wrap this up. So we can have influence with others when we sense the catalyst times. There are times or seasons when an individual's life can shift in a new direction or a new position or direction. Leaders would do well to maintain a sensitivity to those opportunities, to challenge people to shift when the moment to shift has come. Why? Because opportunities of a lifetime has to be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. So as leaders, they are catalyst times, which means there are moments that will come. And if you don't seize it, then that person's life may not go in the direction it should go. You have to know there are some phone calls that needs to be made like right now. There are certain words that needs to be said like right now, meaning look for those opportunities when you should say the right things, when you should make the phone call. All right? There are some influences that we can have with people if we just have the discernment of when to be, or to be at a sensitivity to seize opportunities to challenge people to shift when a moment has come. Yeah. You know what? I've always believed that any great athlete, well, let me back that up. Very few athletes who have succeeded have done so on their own without having a great coach or a great mentor or someone that can provoke them. And that's what a mentor does. That's what a great coach does. They're able to maintain that sensitivity when they see an opportunity to get the athlete to push a little more or to shift a strategy or to change a technique. They're able to do that. Say, look, what about if you try this instead of that? Because there's a moment when that person can shift. All right. So I think that's about there. Is like I said, this is a 12-hour course. I think I've given you a lot already. I'm going to wrap this up right here because there is so much yet to say, but there's so much that I've already given you. But I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank Apostle for the opportunity to be able to impart and to share with you what I believe to be some key principles on how you can become a person of influence, a leader that influences others. Thank you so much. Back to you, Apostle. God bless.
Well, God be the glory. We have received a 6-course meal in a very short period of time, and I'm hopeful, and I know that we are going to regurgitate and go it over again, again and again. Go through the points. I have I have quite a few things here that I'm going to be chewing on and making them my personal stuff. Take responsibility, know where you are, know who you are, be willing to change, learn to rise to the occasion. No one grows in their comfort zone. No one grows in their comfort zone. Oh, that can preach all week. No one grows in their comfort zone. Oh, bless the Lord, man. When do you influence? I like that one. When it is most needed, learn to discern destiny moments. There are times when people are on a critical juncture. A little assistance will get them over the hump. Know the times to bust a move. Oh, yes. The song that Whitney Houston did back in the day, give me one moment in time when I'm racing with destiny, when all of my dreams, bubble, bubble, they're a heartbeat away, and the answers are all up to me. Give me one moment in time. And in that moment in time, I will be. Oh man, she can make you see eternity with that song. When do you influence? When it is most needed. You don't have to look too far because our world is full of people in pain of all sorts, and nobody cares. This would be a good time for our light to shine, for it to shine before men that they can see our good works and glorify our Father who's in heaven. When do you influence? When it is most needed. Learn to discern destiny moments. Oh, to God be the glory. The opportunity to influence occurs in teachable moments when a lesson can be learned. I would normally say that can preach. Because I'm seeing something there that, you know, the way the Lord made my brain to function. You have an opportunity to influence in teachable moments. And then here's a warning, a clause there. The unteachable, those who don't want to learn and cannot be taught, they shut down their personal growth and they shut down moments of destiny because they don't see the value in learning. The unteachable, the know-it-alls. And then there are breakthrough places, places of pain. Pain always births the new generation. So pain is good. Make pain, learn to make pain your friend. Pain is a good teacher. Glory to God. Catalyst times, be sensitive to moments of shifts. Catalyst time. For instance, now in the world on a global scale, the nations are shifting. All nations are shifting, whether they know it or not. They're going to be called to make decisions that when the shift is over, many of the powerful nations would have lost their status as number one in the world, as number two in the world. Other nations are going to emerge. Catalyst times, be sensitive to moments of shifts. And some nations are going to come out with tremendous profit during these shifts, and others are going to come out with great, great loss. Great loss. What about you? What about your personal life? These are catalyst times. These are catalyst moments. Tremendous shift. A catalyst is what is used to add speed, to give more impetus to whatever it is. And these are moments like that. Things are happening at a faster rate of speed. And a lot of people are going to profit from it, from these shifting times. And a lot of people are going to be left far behind. Be sensitive to moments of shifts, of shiftings. And be aware that today, some people can be down, but tomorrow, the way things happen, if they make the right choices, they can catapult themselves into areas that they never would have dreamed of. You mark my words. It wouldn't be 2 years from now that major powers would have lost their super status as the #1 in the world. Wink, wink. They would have lost their status. And others would have emerged and have taken their place and solidified their position on a global level. We're talking leadership here. And so we have got to be aware of the world we're living in and keep our eyes on the ball. We are the children of Issachar, men that have understanding of the times. For what? This small tribe was insightful and prophetic to know what Israel ought to do. And they had their brethren under their command. And those were brethren that could take command. And so you can lead and yet be following something else. It doesn't mean you're going to be out in front all of the time, because somebody may see something that needs someone to take the lead. And because you don't understand the parameters in which that thing functions, you can also be a good leader in your area, but you're following over here. You can be a follower over here and a leader over here. Don't take it personal. You have got to be in charge of everything and everybody. Sometimes the great leader is leading from behind. He's following for all he's worth because he knows this guy up front knows what he's talking about, and he will get us to the promised land. What a blessing today. I don't want to stop, but I've got to stop. To God be the glory. We're glad for Dr. Gilbert. I'm always intrigued by the way his mind works, and I know I'm going to get a few pointers, things that are going to make me think and chew, and things that are going to stretch my brain, and like the rubber band, I will be unable to go back because the flexibility has pulled me out of shape, and I'm glad to have grown during this hour that we spent. To God be the glory. Thanks to everybody for joining with us. The Lord bless and keep you, make his face to shine upon you as you seek to become who you are, born to lead. God bless. Have a good one, everybody. And thanks to Dr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Apostle. God bless.
Thank you, Apostle. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert.